Welcome to another episode of Eco Talks. Today we have Genevieve from Thomas Franks to discuss their sustainable efforts and how they're making a positive impact in the food industry. So, Genevieve, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you joined Thomas Franks in the first place?
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Zane. Happy to be here. So, yes, I have worked for Thomas Franks as the group head of sustainability for about a year now. But before that, I spent 15 years running my own sustainability and leadership consultancy. So, I worked with organizations all over the world, looking at how we join leadership and culture together with achieving environmental and social goals. And about 5 years ago, started working a lot in the realm of B Corps. I don't know if you've come across B Corp, but it's one of the biggest global sustainability movements, actually, not just certifications. And when Thomas Franks wanted to become a B Corp, they found their way to me, and the rest is history. So I decided to join Thomas Franks, not just because of the amazing people in this organization, but because we get to work with so many young people now in 10 countries, being a fast growing ethical caterer for independent schools. So that was a huge attraction to me to get to work with students like yourself, Zane.
Very interesting. Can you tell us about the journey of Thomas Franks and how it has evolved into the company it is today?
Yeah, of course. Well, so Thomas Franks is now 20 years old. It was founded 20 years ago by Frank and Emma Bothwell, who still lead the company today. So we are family run, fiercely independent, I would say, and still really have a lot of those family values and cultures at the core of our organization. So things ethics have always been core to how we've operated. So Frank and Emma have always had a healthy interest in people and developing our people and taking care of our people. And as a result, now 20 years on, we are a platinum investors in people caterer, which means we do a lot in the realm of development and health and well-being and apprenticeships, this idea of lifelong learning. But we also have always had charity and community at our core. So from funding bursaries for young people to come into independent schools to supporting now over 300 different non-profit organizations across the world,
Wow.
or the Thomas Franks Foundation, which was formed in 2012, which has since it was 2020, since it was formed, actually has now created well over 3 million meals for people on the streets and families in need, and exists to kind of address food poverty. So ethics is just core to who we are, and I would say the emerging field in our realm of kind of social and environmental impact is looking also at the environmental side of how we source food, plan menus, work with local suppliers to all of the different schools that we partner with, to also reduce the environmental impact and carbon impact of our food offering. So we've always had a healthy social ethos at our core, and now we're marrying that up with environmental impact so that our food can not only be as ethical as possible, but also as environmentally friendly as possible.
So it seems like you've always been on the good side of the ethics.
That's a good way of putting it. It's always been core to the business ethos and strategy. And of course, as you grow and evolve and get more complex and operate in lots of different countries, that becomes more challenging. But we have a number of different things that support us in that. We are ISO 9001 and 14001 certified. So for our social and environmental impact, we've just submitted for the Thomas Franks B Corp. So fingers crossed, we'll be a B Corp in the next few months. And we use those frameworks to really support not just doing the right thing and measuring the right things, but also engaging our employees and our stakeholders outside of the organization, like students, parents, teachers, community groups. So it really becomes a communal effort in terms of achieving our sustainability goals.
Okay. Well, it's basically a big team effort, how you
It
say.
is a big family, I would say.
Yeah. How do you choose where to buy food from, and what makes a supplier a good fit for Thomas Franks?
That's a really good question. So again, one of our core USPs since we were founded, and this is something that Frank and Emma and our leadership team are really passionate about, is we only work with independent family-run sustainable suppliers. So we have a code of conduct at Thomas Franks that looks at a number of different social and environmental elements that we find really important, not just looking after people and labor and what you're doing to mitigate things like modern slavery, but also, are you measuring the carbon impact of your food sourcing? You know, have you got waste strategies in place? How do you use packaging? So number one is, you know, how truly sustainable are they? Obviously, there's also things like the certifications around food safety and health and safety that we look at. But also, we always try and source as locally as possible to the schools that we work with or the businesses that we work with. So we try and do that regionally. It, you know, doesn't always fall within that, depending on what you're trying to source or the country territory. I know sometimes things are quite challenging to source, especially in places like Malta, where only certain things grow. But equally, we try and make sure that all of those suppliers are as close as possible and they're all family run and independent. And I think that's really shows in the sorts of relationships that we build with our supply chain, and how we bring them in to work directly with our schools as well, so that people have a really good understanding of where their food comes from and how it's produced.
As you said, Malta is a bit of a challenge to source food.
It
Are there
is.
yeah, are there any foods that are harder to get in a sustainable way? And if so, how do you handle that?
Oh, that's another good question. So yes, it depends on which aspect of sustainability you're looking at, right? So quite often people will focus on things like food miles as a big carbon emitter. That's actually very small in the grand scheme of things when you look at things like land use or water intensity of certain foods. So I was in a school last week where we were talking about rice as one example. Rice is incredibly water intensive and takes a lot of water. So we're looking at suppliers who are trying to use new technologies to reduce the amount of water that's needed to produce the rice or use it in a kind of circular fashion. And so, you know, it's looking at all sorts of environmental impacts related to food, not just carbon. And I think this is going to become more and more important. Obviously, you've got products like palm oil, you know, which has had a lot of publicity around that and also features in a lot of foods. So we only work with suppliers who use sustainable farming methods, not just for palm oil, but for any sort of controversial product like that. And then it spills into things like meat and fish, and looking at animal welfare standards, sustainable fishing, and making sure that, you know, these practices are being employed by our suppliers. And sometimes, of course, that impacts the price, but we believe that's worth it because it means that you're not only getting better food, it's being produced in a much more sustainable way.
So you really have a lot of more as a company.
Yes, we do. Our purchasing team do an incredible job when they are looking for new suppliers or setting up supply chains from scratch in countries that we're launching into. And it takes a long time, and but we believe that that's the right thing to do. We have very long relationships with our suppliers, so many of them have kind of been with us almost since the beginning of the company. Some of the bigger ones, so you know, we go on a bit of a journey together with them, I think, and that's going to become really important in the years to come as we start to see more and more, especially environmental legislation coming in around things like biodiversity and water use, and particularly in the EU zone where you're looking at some of the new sustainability reporting that's coming in for big companies. So it's going to become more important, not less.
Yeah. After the food is sourced, what steps do you take to ensure meals are made in a way that reduces waste?
Yes. Oh, food waste. This has been the year of food waste. So,
Yes. And in my school canteen, like I see just
yeah,
all of that food not being eaten, and I say, what are they going to do with all that? Like, are they going to throw it
yeah.
all away?
I will. Yeah. So this year there's lots of food waste legislation starting to come out, particularly in the UK, but it's now really being looked at in Europe as well. So, you know, this will fall into Malta too. And food waste for us is so central to what we do. We try and reduce food waste from every part of the food chain, not just at the end when it's on someone's plate or it's in the kitchen. So, you know, sourcing as locally as possible means that you can order less, and it means that you are less likely to have, you know, things go out of date in the kitchen or just not use them in the right amount, in the right way. So we order less often. We also order seasonally so that we're not trying to get things from far away when they're out of season, particularly fruit and vegetables. And then the way that our chefs will plan menus will also be very clever. So they'll look at how they use an ingredient multiple times. So often when something's produced, you know, as a side vegetable or a salad, if there's leftover food, it then gets repurposed into different dishes the next day and the next day, or it gets frozen and used in a different way a few days later. So our salad bars quite often will take ingredients that are left over and integrate them into new and delicious salads. Anything that's left over in the kitchen often gets reused into either stocks or soups or smoothies. But actually, do you know what? This year, our chefs have really taken on this challenge and they've started to create zero waste recipes, which we're
Wow.
doing in lots of our schools. And we actually have a zero waste cookbook coming out, which I will happily share with you, Zane, which looks at the 5 most common ingredients wasted in the kitchen. I think it's onions, cauliflower, broccoli, bread, and provides a number of tricks and tips as to how to avoid food waste, but also gives some delicious recipes in terms of what you can do with some of those things as well. So there's a lot of focus on this year. We obviously also measure all our food waste as well. So we record how much waste is coming from students' plates or from the kitchen or things surplus, we call it. So meals that went out and can't be reused or reserved due to health and safety and food safety. And we try and work with the schools and the students in the schools to reduce that food waste through a number of different initiatives. So we have one rolling at the minute called the Great Food Waste Challenge, where we actually have schools across in various different countries now actually competing with each other to see if they can do innovative and creative things to reduce their food waste. And I'd love to see some more schools in Malta joining that challenge because it's been really, really exciting to see what the students have come up with.
Where do you think we can get the book? Because online, or you can just buy it from a shop, or
I have it online for you, and I will certainly send you a QR code as well, which means people can scan it and just get the little booklet, and there'll be more coming. I think it's going to be a seasonal thing. So the first one's kind of spring, and then we'll see because the ingredients change throughout the year, right?
yeah, it's very interesting. Apart from addressing food waste, Malta also faces a plastic pollution problem,
Yes.
especially along its coastlines. How is Thomas Franks working to reduce plastic waste and its impact on the environment?
Oh, plastic is such a tricky issue, isn't it? So
Yeah.
we for a few years now have not used what I would call pristine single-use plastic in our kitchens or in any of the takeaway cartons that we use in our schools. And so with the plastic we do use is either bioplastics and compostable plastics, so i.e. made of sugarcane. Quite often there's one called bagasse where you're working with a company called Notpla, which uses seaweed to create almost like a biomaterial, or it's recycled and recyclable plastic. But that doesn't really necessarily solve the issue, right? Because sometimes it's very difficult to get plastics into the right recycling stream, depending on the country or the region. So what we're doing is continually working with our suppliers, not just in our kitchens, but also in their supply chains to try and eradicate plastics in whatever way we can. It's very difficult. So where we can't, every kitchen needs a wrap, like a cling film wrap. We try and use bio wraps or recycled plastic that can be recyclable and recycled again and again. And it's just this ongoing journey when it comes to plastics, because I think as technology catches up, we start to see really new and innovative bioplastics coming onto the market. But you know what? At the end of the day, Zane, you can't beat just reusables. So where we can stop using packaging full stop and use plates and glass cups cups and mugs, that's the best option, because then you can wash them and reuse them again and reuse them again. So we try to reduce overall packaging, whether it's plastic, cardboard, glass, anything. But where we have to use it, we try and use the right materials, and also work with our suppliers to constantly stay ahead of what's the best material now, and how can we continually improve what we do.
How do you help customers make better food choices for the planet?
Oh, there's lots of education in Thomas Franks. So not only do we try and engage and educate the people around our kitchens, so whether that's students, teachers, parents, but we do a lot externally as well, talking about food systems and key sustainability issues. So as I said, food waste this year has been a big one. So if you look on social media and on LinkedIn, we've been doing a lot of posting around, what we're doing as a company to reduce food waste, but also inviting people to try it in the home and try and take it home with them. So the schools that were participating in the Great Food Waste Challenge, they've done a lot of things to take it home and try and engage their parents, their community, and almost spread the ripple effect a little wider. The other thing that we have in Thomas Franks is a strong focus on health and nutrition and sustainable diets. So we have a team of 5 nutritionists who travel all over the world, and teach a number of different topics, whether it's nutrition for brain health or nutrition for stress reduction, or there's one that I do with them called sustainable diet myth busting. So we love to come out and do workshops, seminars, and generally bring this to life in the restaurants that we operate, so that actually people can just every day understand a little bit more about what it means to be eating healthy, fresh, nutritious, and sustainable food.
Very good. How does Thomas Franks ensure that food in school canteens is both ecologically and economically good for the environment?
Yes, well, this kind of comes back to how we source and also how we cook. So, if we can ensure, as we were saying earlier, that all the food coming into the school is sourced as locally and sustainably as possible through amazing suppliers who often have their own environmental and social projects going on. So, we try to bring that to life as well. Then the way we cook is also really important. So, we described how we try and make it as zero food waste as possible in the kitchens, but we are starting this year a whole nother round of education with our chefs around becoming more energy and water efficient in the kitchens. So, just thinking about the simple things you can do to just not turn things on if you're not using them, or to think about how we can use water in more sustainable ways. And often this involves working directly with the school itself, to sometimes when we upgrade the kitchen, we use really energy efficient equipment. We replace it with, things like heat pumps or different materials in the kitchen that mean that actually we're using less overall. And of course, that then has a positive impact on carbon as well. So if you're using less energy and less water, then you're using less carbon. So a lot of it is about education, and it's about listening to our chefs all over the world in terms of best practice and what they're doing, and making sure that we're sharing that across our entire company so that we can get better and better. In a previous world, I used to be a continuous improvement manager as well. So I quite often look at sustainability as efficiency and effectiveness. And of course, into that, the second part of your question is how can we be as economical and how can we ultimately save money? And so when we look at sustainability as efficiency, then things like food waste reduction has an instant impact to the bottom line, and how much food we're having to buy because we're wasting less of it. So I think quite often when you look at financial sustainability, if you're doing the right things, you have a positive environmental impact and a social impact at the same time.
Are there any exciting projects coming up at Thomas Franks, such as the ones you already mentioned, or any more?
Oh, there's always exciting projects coming up at Thomas Frank. So, as I said, this year we're focusing a lot on food waste and including our suppliers into that as well. Trying to, quite often, our Thomas Franks Foundation will work with our suppliers to reallocate large amounts of food that would go to landfill or surplus, bring them into our kitchens and make nutritious and delicious meals for community groups, charities, people living homeless on the streets. So we continue to do that on on an ongoing basis this year. And our foundation team actually have an initiative all about ending street hunger. So diverting food from landfill and making it into meals to go out to homeless communities in the UK and across Europe. So that's a really exciting project. And we are also doing a lot, as I said, packaging innovation with not just within our kitchens, but also within our supply chains. So we're actually doing a big project right now to remove even some of the compostable packaging that we have in our kitchens and replace that either with reusables or some of the, biomaterials that I was talking about, so that we can just become ever more sustainable when it comes to the waste that we're producing, but also the packaging that we're using in our kitchens. This year, I think, is also the year of really starting to roll out our decarbonisation plans a little bit more. So we've been working with an organisation called Planet Mark for a few years, looking at our company carbon footprint. And it's really exciting in that in the last year, we actually managed to reduce our carbon in our scope 1 and 2, so our kind of heating, fuel, electricity, by 9.1% across our business in 1 year, which is actually really amazing. So we're continuing that work with them and looking at how we can reduce it across our supply chain and in our business travel and commuting. So that work will also continue this year. And I think we'll be doing a lot more in schools with Planet Mark as our partner to start to roll out some carbon education and carbon literacy as well.
So to wrap everything up, what's one easy change someone can make today to eat more sustainably?
Oh, good gosh, just one. I would say, and I'll pass you my top tip that I've been trying to do, is actually it's to not buy as much food. It's interesting. I've been really focused on how I have less food waste in my kitchen this year. And what I realized when I looked at it is I was buying way too much food that often would go to waste, or I'd end up having to make a massive soup or stew to make sure that the vegetables didn't go out moldy or out of date. So I've started thinking about what meals I'm going to make like at the beginning of the week, so I'm not just buying lots of food and then coming home and going, wow, what am I going to make tonight? So I've started planning my meals a bit better, and I've started also taking some tips and from our chefs around when you do have peelings or waste, how can you repurpose them into things like delicious onion bhajis or bone broths or soups. And so I've started trying to cook some new things as well, using up leftover food. And my shopping bill's also gone down, so that's a really top tip. I would say plan your meals, think about what you're going to make, and also try some new recipes, because I think that also helps us be more creative and eat a wider range of nutritious food as well.
So basically, there are the things that you can do.
I would say
Um,
that is a top tip for having a more zero waste kitchen, definitely.
Thanks for tuning in into another episode of Eco Talks. A big thank you to Genevieve for sharing her knowledge on Thomas Frank's sustainable practices. Anything else that you would like to add?
Or just that, in Malta, you live in one of the most beautiful countries in the world with all kinds of delicious food. So I would love to see a Maltese version of a zero waste cookbook with some of your cultural recipes in there. I think that could be really fun.
Well, hopefully we'll have in the future.
Thanks, Zane. That was amazing. Good to talk to you.
You too. You can listen to this episode on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Stay tuned for more conversations on how we can all make a positive impact on the planet. Until next time, stay eco.